What's up guys, it's TLS here. I am back inside the Dream Grove for the second video in the 2-video series looking at feral druids and how they have changed in World of Warcraft Legion. In the first video we took a look at the changes to abilities for feral druids in Legion, as well as the artifact weapon, the Claws of Ashamain, if I have that correctly pronounced. Yes, the Fangs of Ashamain, excuse me. So the artifact weapon and the abilities were discussed in the first video. In this second video, we are going to be looking at the actual talents for a feral druid. Now, I discussed in the first video that it's kind of disappointing that so little has changed for a feral druid in World of Warcraft Legion, and I am sorry to tell you that that is the same for the talent trees. That same lack of change is also apparent in the talent trees. You will see very little in the PvE talent trees. However, the PvP talent tree will be brand new, so that'll be something new that we get to go over. However, do not expect much change in the the PvE talent tree. The big thing that you will want to know is we will be talking about affinities, which is probably it's odd. It's only one talent tier change, but it is probably the most significant change for any talent tree period across the board in all classes, and that's because of what it aims to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the talent tree. Starting off with the PvE talents. First, we'll start in the 15 tier with this ability Predator. It is a passive. The cooldown on Tiger's Fury resets when a target dies to one of your bleed effects. When one of your bleed effects active. With one of your bleed effects active. Sorry, can't even read that all correctly. So, basically, if a target has bleed on it, which technically your target should have bleeds on them, you will get a reset on Tiger's Fury. Second option here is Blood Scent. Your melee abilities in cat form have a 10% chance, increased critical strike chance on targets with a bleed effect. And then lastly, we have Lunar Inspiration. This was a 100 talent. It has now been brought all the way down to 15. I like this. Lunar Inspiration was one of my more favored talents, and so I'm glad that it has now been brought all the way down to 15. In terms of PvE, I'm not sure which one will get the kind of the praise, the go-ahead from the theory crafters as to which one is the best. However, I personally do like Lunar Inspiration in terms of PvP because it gives you a range option. However, that may not be much of an issue once we get to the 45 tier and I start explaining that out. In the 30 tier, you have 3 abilities, and all 3 of them are the exact same. This is kind of a combination of the old 15 and 30 tiers. Cenarian Ward is gone, Isir's Gift is gone in a way, and Feline Swiftness is gone in a way. And I say in a way because Feline Swiftness is actually the base, it's base in the actual Feral Druid kit. I'm not sure if it actually shows up, yes, it actually does show up as a baseline passive. So Feline Swiftness is there as a baseline passive, and that is new, whereas it used to be something that you actually had to, where it used to be an actual talent that you have to take, but that's no longer the case. Isir's Gift we will get to in a second. That's going to be dealing with the 45 tier. But Feline Swiftness is now baseline, and then you have Displacer Beast, Wild Charge, and Renewal rounding out that 30 tier, and all 3 of them are the same. So that brings us to the 45 tier, and this is the most important tier. And this is what Blizzard is trying to do. Stances have been removed from the game. Stances gave you this kind of fantasy in which you could switch into a different stance and be tankier, or you could switch into a different stance and have better AoE damage. Stances have been obliterated from the game in every spec. Priest, Warrior, Monk, you name it. Death Knight. And really the only stance, dancing, well, not dancing, but the only stance changes are now in the form of Druids. And that kind of makes sense. You're the shapeshifter. And what they're trying to do with this tier is basically give you something that you're good at that's other than just being a feral druid. You can have a balance affinity, you can have a guardian affinity, and you can have a restoration affinity. I said Isir's Gift was somewhat gone, and that is partially true. It is a passive for a Restoration Druid. However, if you choose the Restoration Affinity, you get Ysera's Gift, which heals you for 3% of your maximum health every 5 seconds, which is a little bit less than what it used to, but it's still there. You also gain back Rejuvenation. As I mentioned, you would regain it back depending on which talent you chose. In the abilities video, I talked about that. You gain back Rejuvenation. You also gain Regrowth and Swift Mend. So these are all abilities that you gain if you decide to go with the Restoration Affinity. Now, if you remember that talent that comes with the Fangs of Ashamain, there is actually a talent in the Fangs of Ashamain that will give you armor, basically. It's Protection of Ashamain. Gives you increased dodge chance and armor when you shapeshift out of cat form. This can be very useful if you decide to go with that PvE Restoration Affinity. You pop out, put Rejuve on yourself, put Regrowth on yourself, Swift Man, go back into cat form. That is an option for you. The second option here is going to be Guardian Affinity. You gain Thick Hide, which reduces all damage taken by 10. You also learn Mangle, Iron Fur, and Frenzied Regeneration. Now, Frenzied Regeneration, you guys know how that functions. It functions very similar to how it does on live. I believe it has, I do believe that it actually does have a charges to it now, which is a little bit different. We'll get into that when we get into the Guardian video. And Iron Fur is a new damage mitigation. Before, damage mitigation was kind of about, you know, dodging, and they decided that dodging should definitely be a Brewmaster mechanic, not a, you know, not a Guardian Druid mechanic. So they replaced it with Iron Fur, which is a different type of mitigation, which I will get to in the Guardian video when I get to Guardian Druids. But you get, access. I was trying to get the right word out there. You get access to Mangle, Iron Fur, and Frenzied Regeneration if you choose Guardian Affinity. The third option here is Balance Affinity, and this is the one I chose. And the reason why I chose this, and I told you that I would explain this in this video, is basically the passive that you get, which is Astral Influence. It increases the range of all your abilities by 5 yards. That includes every single one of your melee abilities. Maybe for PvEer, this is not what you want. For PvEer, you may be looking more towards Ysera's Gift or Guardian Affinity to help out your raid. I can totally understand that. But in terms of PvP, I really do believe that Balance is the best one, and that is because of the range. Now, you're still going to have stuff like Infected Wounds, and you have the snare off of Rake, but having a 10-yard range on your melee abilities, I mean, look how far away I am, and I'm able to attack with my full entire, you know, course of abilities, and that's a long range. You know, to be able to have a 10-yard range on all of your melee abilities, that's what makes Balance Affinity so powerful as a Feral Druid in a PvP setting, and that is why I've chosen it. I really could care less for Moonkin form. Star Surge is really not something I really care about. Same thing with Lunar Strike, Solar Wrath, which Solar Wrath is, by the way, just a renamed of Wrath. And Sunfire, I really could care less about that. All I really care about is, you know, having the ability to have the extra range on this. Now, it does come with Sunfire, which is another dot. So if you want to have Lunar Inspiration, Moonfire, Sunfire, and then all of your bleeds on the target, that could be something that you may want, but I'm pretty sure that in PvE that would end up being a DPS loss. I'm not quite sure. I'm not an expert in the mathematics behind what does the most damage in PvE, but this is basically what Blizzard is doing with this 45 tier, is they really want you to have something that you can tie yourself to. That you can be, okay, you know, like I am now able to, you know, dish out some, you know, magical damage from a distance if I need to, with Star Surge, Lunar Strike, and Solar Wrath, and Sunfire if I need to. And remember, Sunfire is an AoE dot, so maybe in PvE it will be useful to have Sunfire. You can open up with Sunfire before leading into all of your, you know, your thrashes and your swipes. to help out with some, you know, AoE damage in a PvE situation. That's something to think about there. So there's a lot of options for people here in terms of both PvE and PvP. Definitely PvP, the increased range, comparing Fangs of Ashmane, your ability to get out and heal up is another option for PvP. And then in PvE, I likely will probably think we'll see Guardian Affinity or Restoration Affinity tied to your Feral Druid, because being in close range is not necessarily as paramount as it is in PvP, with all the latency and lag and, you know, people being different places and so forth. So that's something to think about, and this is probably the most interesting tier in all the changes in World of Warcraft, and that is because this is now the only place in World of Warcraft in which you still have some type of, you know, stance switching, I guess you could say. One downfall to the Balance Affinity tier that I actually only discovered when doing the last video is that Moonkin Form actually has a 1.5 minute cooldown, which really stinks. And I'm not quite sure, to be honest, whether Lunar Strike and these abilities deal damage based on your agility. I think they do. They do deal damage based on your affinity. So you switch into Moonkin form and you're able to deal this damage, and it should deal, you know, 12,000 per tick. I do know for sure that Moonfire is based off of your agility, so it's doing 12,000 per tick. Moonfire should be pretty close, and it is. So expect your damage, to what you're able to do out of Moonkin form, to be pretty decent. You have all the core balanced Druid abilities there. The only thing you're really missing is Starfall. So this is good. It's like a playstyle choice. Definitely there will be better options in certain situations, but for the most part, it's a playstyle choice, and you get to kind of choose, you know, which one you like the best. And for me, it's having that 5 extra yards on Feral Druids in PvP. I think that's just so potent. In the 60 tier, you have 3 abilities, once again like the 30 tier, that are all the same. Every single one is the same. This is combining the old 45 tier with Mighty Bash in the 75 tier, so they're all combined into one now. Blizzard, by the way, really doesn't have themed tiers. I mean, yes, the 45 tier is a themed tier, but as you can see in the 30 tier, you're basically choosing between putting some distance between you and someone else, gaining some distance, or reducing the distance between you and someone else, or just healing yourself. Before, it would have been all gap closers in the tier. Or it would have been a tier all about healing. They've kind of shifted away from that. Yes, there will still be tiers that are like that. The affinity tier being one, you know, all about being a different affinity or choosing what your secondary form is going to be. And the 60 tier being all about some form of CC, I understand that. But for the most part, Blizzard has kind of cut out that kind of requirement about each tier being about something specific, which I really do like. It really gives more diversity and choice, and kind of allows you to craft your character the way you want it to be. In the so just in review before we get to the 75 tier, everything is still the same in this tier. They all function exactly the same. They work the same. Just remember that with Astral Affinity, all of these have 5 extra yards on them, which is pretty cool. So like your Mighty Bash will now have a 10-yard range as opposed to the old melee range that it used to be. So just so you know about that, Astral Affinity, Astral Influence, which comes from Balance Affinity, will affect everything. 60 tier though, everything is still the same. In the 75 tier, these abilities have all changed, and then we have the new incoming Savage Roar. I would never ever take this. I described in the last video how much I hate Savage Roar, and so I'm so glad that it is now a talent and I can say, oh, Savage Roar there. Well, I guess I only have 2 talent choices for the 75 tier because I have no desire to ever use Savage Roar. So I'm definitely happy about that. Let me go ahead just so you guys can see, just to make sure. Many spell visuals and effects have changed. Let me just go ahead and use Savage Roar so you guys can actually see here if it has changed at all. And you can see right there, that is the effect for Savage Roar. But otherwise, it is a increased damage ability. It's interesting for PvEers. I do not see ever a PvPer taking Savage Roar. I would consider it crazy to take this in PvP because it was frustrating enough to deal with in PvP, and now that it is gone, PvPers will actually get an option in Warlords of sorry, not Warlords of Draenor, in World of Warcraft Legion. Soul of the Forest has been changed. The old Soul of the Forest, your finishing moves grant 4 energy per combo point. Now it grants 6 energy per combo point. So a little bit of a buff there for Soul of Forest. In the middle here, we have Incarnation. This has been changed a little bit. Let me go ahead and read off the old one so you understand what it was. An improved cap form that allows the use of Prowl while in combat and causes Shredded Rake to function as if stealth were active. Here is the new one. An improved cap form that allows the use of Prowl while in combat, causes Shred and Rake to deal damage as if stealth were active, and it also reduces the cost of cap form abilities by 50% and increases maximum energy by 50%. So there's a lot there. Now, the big thing here is that you have to know that this now replaces Berserk, okay? So Berserk right now is on a 3-minute cooldown, and it gives you that buff. So basically what they have done now is they've taken the old Incarnation King of the Jungle and they have combined it with Berserk into one ability. Basically this is like reducing a button on your bar. I guess you could say, when you're comparing to live versus beta. It's just like, okay, we're just going to combine these for you so you don't have to worry about pressing both of them at the same time. I'm not sure if I like this. For the most part, Incarnation has stayed the same, but it's kind of a bummer that they would do something like this. I don't know what is going to be the more popular option, Incarnation or Soul of the Forest, but you choose Incarnation. Basically, you're just I guess you could say it's just an improved Berserk now, as opposed to Incarnation being a separate ability and Berserk being a separate ability. You choosing when, maybe you may not want to activate both at the same time, if the situation is different. You no longer have that option. It just replaces Berserk and you're forced to use both at the same time. So, I'm not sure how popular this will be. Compared to Soul of the Forest. For PvP, it'll easily be one of these two. Most likely, it'll still be Incarnation in PvP. PvE, if you really hate Savage Roar, it'll be Soul of the Forest. It could be Incarnation, I'm not sure. There's interesting options on this tier. All you need to know is that tier list will not be choosing Savage Roar. That is for sure. In the 90 tier, the old 90 tier for Druids has just been nuked. They got rid of everything. They hated it. So they nuked it all, and so now we have some new stuff here in the 90 tier, which is fun. Sabertooth Ferocious Bite always refreshes the duration of Rip. Well, this is great for PvEers because it basically allows you to basically take one thing out of your rotation. So not only is Savage Roar taken out of your rotation if you take Soul of the Forest, but Sabertooth allows you to take Rip out of the rotation as well. I mean, we'll show it right here. We can show it real quick. Just get enough for a Rip right there, and then we'll go ahead and use it here. Get Ferocious Bite, and we'll use it, and Rip is refreshed to the beginning. And it will be the beginning, it's always 24 seconds, so it's just going to be increased back to its full duration of 24 seconds. And so you just want to make sure that you have 5 points on the target, or else you'll be consistently refreshing something that you don't want. You'll have a lower damage Rip on there. So you just have to make sure that Rip is done with 5 combo points, and then you can continue to use Ferocious Bite from there on out. The second option here is Jagged Wounds. Your Rip, Rake, and Thrash abilities deal the same damage as normal, but in 33% less time. This is actually pretty cool. I actually like this, and as I was writing stuff up, I almost made a huge mistake in listing all of these ability changes until I realized that I had this talent activated and realized that the reason why they all were lasting less time was because of the Jagged Wounds talents. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is something that PvPers like. It allows you to put more damage. You know, dots are, you know, so spread out most of the time, and being able to, you know, condense that and allow your dots to tick faster and deal damage quicker is in my opinion a real nice attribute to have. I honestly see this being taken by PvPers, and then Sabretooth being something more that is a PvPer type of thing. In all honesty, Jagged Wounds does not, in all honesty, it does not help a PvEer really much at all. The damage is still the same, it's just doing it in less time, which is basically saying, you know, this is a PvP talent. Like, yeah, sure, if you want to do some damage like quicker, or if you're like, let's say you have Incarnation, Incarnation or so forth, or I guess you could say Berserk. Even then, there's no damage bonus on them, so Jagged Wounds would not increase your PvE DPS from this. So in all actuality, unless you have buffs aligned, like you get trinket procs and so forth, and then you know, then you can align all of your bleeds together and make them tick faster. That's the only time you can see an advantage in maybe PvE, because there's less time. But even then, I'm not an expert on PvE, and I'm pretty sure that basically when a dot is applied, it snapshots your stats at that time and keeps it throughout the entire time. So with that being said, the Jagged Wounds really is worthless to a PvEer, and so Sabretooth would be the more promising ability to take. The third option here is going to be a Loon's Guidance. You immediately gain 5 combo points and an initial 1 combo point every 1 second for 5 seconds. So every 45 seconds you have 10 combo points. This is a very powerful option, definitely in PvE and PvP. I can see this being taken in PvP without question, because while Jagged Wounds does tick faster, I don't think the burst, if you can call it burst, that would come out of Jagged Wounds can beat the burst that would come out of a Loon's Guidance. So, in my opinion, PvPers will probably be taking a Loon's Guidance, because of the 45-second cooldown, that's great. And then PvEers will have to decide between whether the rotation of having to go back to Rip over is worth it with compared to a Loon's Guidance. That's kind of a, you know, that's going to be a theory crafting thing that theory crafters will figure out, and you can Google it and find out what's the best option. But interesting options there. With all of these here, I honestly don't see Jagged Wounds being taken. It only has use in PvP, and if a Loon's Guidance ends up being better in PvP, why even bother with it? Because you can get, you know, 5 combo points and then 5 combo points again really quickly, only on a 45-second cooldown. That's pretty brutal. And so PvPers likely will be taking, in my opinion, a Loon's Guidance. PvEers will have some options open to them, but unless they buff Jagged Wounds, I don't see Jagged Wounds being taken by any spec, either playstyle, PvE or PvP. So maybe they change it, maybe they buff it, I don't know. We still have about a month and a half before beta. The live realms really get the 7.0 patch, so that's when everything will change. So maybe some things will change. I know there will be a beta patch in the next day or so, but as of now, I don't see Jagged Wounds being taken. In the final tier, we have first Brutal Slash. It replaces Swipe. 20 energy, strikes all nearby targets with a massive slash, inflicting 141,000 physical damage, awards 1 combo point, maximum 3 charges. So, let's go ahead and show this off. So normally you have Swipe, which has I believe, a slightly different spell visual. It has the normal swipe across, and then it has kind of like the circles all the way around and then snaps at the very end, which is pretty cool. Okay. Or we can go to, oh my gosh, I have to step back further because of Astral Affinity to get out of combat. And we'll switch to Brutal Slash, so you can see what it is. And do note that it's 3 charges, 16.3-second recharge per cooldown. 13-yard range thanks to the Astral Affinity. I believe its normal is going to be 8-yard range. But we'll use it here. You'll see it right there. It's like a double slash on both sides, like a double claw on both sides. And so I'm not really sure where this use will come into play. It could come into use in PvP because it's a lot of damage. Whereas comparatively, slash is not something. Sorry, not slash. The old swipe is not something that you generally want to be using in PvP setting, but brutal slash might be something worth using because it's low energy cost. It's only 20 energy versus the 45 energy of the swipe, and it's got it has a 16.3-second recharge rate, so it's something you use and it deals a lot of damage, and then you can go on from there. So that's an option that's open to Feral Druids. Second option here is Blood Talons. Casting Healing Touch causes your next 2 melee abilities to deal 30% increased damage for their full duration. So I mean that would be, when they say full duration, they're talking about stuff like Rip and Rake. So just so you know. And then the last one is Omen of Clarity. This is something that was basically a restoration. And now they're bringing it in for Feral Druids. Omen of Clarity now affects the next 3 cat form abilities, and your maximum energy is increased by 30. So I like this tier. There's a lot of options here. I don't see Blood Talons being taken or being popular. I could be wrong, but it honestly, to me, I don't like it. I still believe that Feral has the passive. If I can find it, yeah, the basic Omen of Clarity, is it? No. Here it is, Predatory Swiftness. I had to find it here. Your finishing moves have a 20% per combo point to make your next Healing Touch, Entangling Roots, or Rebirth instant, free, and castable in all forms. So Blood Talon can be useful once you have the Predatory Swiftness passive actually activate for you. It can be useful in PvP, PvE, etc. So you really have 3 interesting options here. I personally like more energy, and having it actually affect the next 3 cat form abilities is pretty nice. Just so you have an idea of what it does now, your auto attacks have a chance to cause clear casting state, making your next cat form ability cost no energy. So instead, now it's the next 3, and your maximum energy is increased by 3%. I really do think this is going to be something that the PvEers are just going to have to kind of lay out and be like, okay, which one is the best DPS increase? Do we insert Healing Touch into the rotation and then get the extra damage, on like a Rip or a Rake? That could be very important, but then that also conflicts with something like if you have Sabertooth, you've had Rip going up for a long time, you would have to refresh it. There's a lot of factors going on here and things that you'll have to pay attention to. And then you'll also pay attention to whether or not Brutal Slash is something that people want in PvP, whether that damage that comes from it with only a 20 damage. Just to give you an idea, Shred does 90,000 physical damage to a target, 20,000 increased to bleeding targets, and while stealth, it does the extra 20% increased damage as it's done before. So, but just to give you an idea, Brutal Slash does 141,000 damage. So even though it's an AoE ability, it does better than your basic, your basic Shred. It does more than a Ferocious Bite, 106,000. However, a Ferocious Bite can consume energy to increase damage by up to 100%. And then you top that on the fact that you get 30 extra energy from Moment of Clarity. So I'm just trying to lay out all of the options that are available to you as a Feral Druid. There's a lot going on here. Even though the talent tree has really not changed too much, a lot has changed here, and it could be very different depending on your playstyle. So a lot of playstyle options in the PvE talent tree. Let's go ahead and take a look at the PvP talent tree. PvP in World of Warcraft Legion is going to work like Call of Duty. You're going to start at level 1 and you're going to work your way all the way up to level 50. The first 10 levels will grant you the first 10 talents. You'll start with Gladiator's Medallion, work your way all the way down to Savage Momentum. And then from there, I believe at level 13, you gain Adaptation, and you'll begin going all the way down to Fresh Wound. And then lastly, you will go all the way down the third tier, and the last one coming in at level 46. When you reach level 50, you'll be able to Prestige and go all the way down to 1 and lose all of these talents all the way down to Gladiator's Medallion and start over again. That is a decision up to you. That'll be something you can decide to do whether or not you would like to do that. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and look into these talent trees. The first tier here is something that is the same across all classes, and that is dealing with your Honorable Medallion. When you first enter a PvP match, you will be given an Honorable Medallion. This Honorable Medallion is like the Heirloom PvP Trinket. So, it's a 3-minute cooldown trinket. Gladiator's Medallion, the first talent we have here, is a 2-minute trinket, and it replaces your Honorable Medallion. So this basically gives you your basic standard 2-minute PvP trinket. Second option here is Adaptation. All loss of control effects with a duration of 5 seconds or more will activate your Honorable Medallion spell, but only causes it to incur a 60-second cooldown. I personally like this for PvP. Sorry, I've done that in several videos. I personally like this for DPS classes. I don't see healers taking this unless it's a Restoration Druid who can have a lot of hots on themselves. And I really don't see this being taken for tanks. It could be taken for tanks, but this basically gives you a 60-second cooldown trinket, but you don't have control over it. A lot of PvPers like control over their abilities, so they'll take Gladiator's Medallion instead. I personally like this. You still have the option of using your Honorable Medallion because it doesn't replace it. However, it does cause Adaptation to go on a 60-second cooldown. Your third option here is Relentless, and it replaces your Honorable Medallion, and the duration of incoming crowd control effects is reduced by 25%. I honestly do not see healers taking this. I do not see anybody but a tank really taking this, because you're going to have to mitigate some damage for you to be able to take something like this, and losing your trinket can really hurt. In the second tier, this is the melee PvP tier. We have Hardiness, which is while above 80% health, you take 20% less damage. We have a Reinforced Armor, which is health increased by 10%, and then we have Sparring. Physical melee attacks have a 20% chance to be blunted, dealing 50% reduced damage. So that is a very common tier that is across all melee DPS in PvP. They all pretty much have the same tier. The only one that doesn't is Survival, and I've already reported that as possibly being a bug. I don't think Blizzard intended it for it to be that way. In this third tier, we have Protector of the Grove. Using Healing Touch on an ally always critical heals and reduces the cast time of your Healing Touch by 50% for 6 seconds. Not a big fan of this because this is encouraging you to use multiple healing touches as a Feral Druid, which I really don't want. Second option here is Shape Mender. Each time you activate Shapeshift form, you are healed for 5% of your maximum health. This effect does not occur more than once every 5 seconds. So, I've seen this before in action, and it's pretty nice. You get a nice 5% heal every time. So it's a little bit of sustain there. Remember that your shapeshift forms do not cost anything, so you can switch back and forth between Travel, Bear, Cat. Just heal yourself up pretty quickly. Once again, though, it does have that 5-second kind of cooldown on it. The last one here is Leader of the Pack. Shred heals all nearby allies within 10 yards of the target for 24,000. So Leader of the Pack was taken out as an ability, a passive ability for Feral Druids, and they are bringing it back as a PvP talent. They've changed the icon, which would irritate the crud out of me, but they're probably doing it because it deals with Shred, and it's the Shred icon, so maybe that's why they're doing it. But I would really like to have the old regular Leader of the Pack icon there, because it's somewhat the same. It's a little bit the same. In the fourth tier, we have Pouncing Strikes. Rake now has a 10-yard range, causing you to leap to targets when used. Now remember, Rake is the new ability that now snares a target. And if it has a 10-yard range, that means with the Astral Affinity, it now has something like a 15-yard range. So you now have a 15-yard range in which you can jump to the target and snare them. That's pretty awesome. The next one here is Freedom of the Herd. Your stampeding roar clears all roots and snares from yourself and allies. That can be good, very good in a PvE setting. Sorry, a PvE setting. It can't even be used in a PvE setting. That can be very useful in a rated battleground setting where your whole team may be snared by someone and you can use Freedom of the Herd to get them away. There is Primal Vitality. When you enter Prowl, the cast time of your next healing touch is reduced by 100%. Not sure about this one. I can see its uses, but it just seems awkward. It's like if you're escaping and then you're able to get into Prowl form and then you get the instant cast healing touch. I don't know. I like pouncing strikes the most by far, especially on a one-to-one basis. Maybe for rated battlegrounds, Freedom of the Herd, but pouncing strikes would be my option in this tier. You have King of the Jungle, passive for every enemy you have Rip active on. Your damage and movement speed is increased by 4%, stacks up to 3 times. Getting Rip active on different enemies is irritating. It would be pretty irritating. Maybe if it was Rake, that'd be different. But Rip, not so much. And so getting a 12% movement speed through going all the trouble of getting Rip active on 3 different targets, to be honest, is not that worth it to me. There's Blood Trauma. Passive main now does increased. Main damage is now increased by 100%, but now incapacitates instead of stuns. Any attack will break the incapacitate. Another ability that I don't see PvPers taking. That stun is so potent. You know, it gives you kind of the rest as a feral druid. That's your setup. So making it an incapacitate I don't think would be very useful. The last option here is Fury Swipes. Casting Thrash will remove the energy cost of your next swipe for 12 seconds. I really hate this tier. Let's just put that out here. There really isn't a talent in this tier that I'm really impressed with. This is all AoE focused. This is very odd. And will at most only give you a small speed increase. Likely this will be the one that you use just because it gives you that small buff in movement speed. Blood Trauma I just don't see people taking at all. And Fury Swipes is a PvE talent. This is one of those situations, and I've mentioned it in another video previously, in which I feel like some of these talents maybe need to be switched out with these talents. For instance, Jagged Wounds maybe taken out and put into one of these trees. I mean, I think that would be great for Jagged Wounds to be in this tree as opposed to one of these options. So just something, some insight there from how I feel about this talent tree. In the last tier, we have Savage Momentum. Interrupting a spell with Skull Bash resets the cooldown on Tiger's Fury. That's pretty awesome. That's a really awesome ability right there. So anytime you're able to interrupt with your Bash Skull, which I believe is a 15-second cooldown, you get your Tiger's Fury back up, which is a 30-second cooldown. So you can have some pretty good uptime, on your Tiger's Fury. Second option here is Fresh Wound. Rake has a 60% increased critical strike chance if used on a target that doesn't already have a Rake active. So basically, your Rake now has a 60% increased critical strike chance. And then if you combine that with pouncing strikes, that's pretty awesome. I really like that ability. The last one here is Rip and Tear. Instantly applies Rake and Rip to the target instantly. I'm assuming that is a full Rip duration. 1 minute cooldown. I can see this being popular for one reason. Basically, it allows a feral druid in a rated setting or even an arena setting to get instant kind of pressure on a healer or whoever they want to pressure, the flag carrier, and then target switch and focus on someone else at the same time. So it's just like a quick way of bolting damage on that target and then switching to the target that really needs to be taken down or is being focused by the rated battleground team. So I can see that being very useful. My personal favorite is, I don't know, I like all of these. I think all of these are great. I would like for these to be intermixed with the tier 5s so that I'd actually have some more options, interesting options for me. But otherwise, this is what we're given for feral druids. once again, we are entering the end phase of beta, so most of these are pretty much now set in stone. There could be changes once beta actually goes live and people start complaining about something being overpowered, and so classes maybe get buffed or nerfed based on that, but otherwise, that's pretty much where we are at in World of Warcraft Legion with Feral Druids. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The PvP talents are somewhat interesting, I should say. There's that one tier that's really kind of bad, and the PvE talents have not changed too much for the most part, but there's some great changes in there, especially with affinity and the 10-yard range on all your abilities, which I honestly think is awesome for PvPers in not Warlords of Draenor, in World of Warcraft Legion. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is all the videos that I'm doing for now until the next patch comes out. Once the next patch comes out, I will begin the process of looking at which classes I feel are set in stone, and then I will start producing the next load of videos. So, see you guys from the Dream Grove. I will see you guys in the next video. Tearless out.